All right, boys and girls, here is a tutorial on the basics of essay writing. And I say the basics because what I have in here is the bare minimum of what just is going to be put together as a workable essay, as a functional essay. This is true if you're moving on to college or other higher education. And for those of you who are, thinking I'm never going to have to do this in your life, this is still a good learning technique if you are ever in a position where you need to write down and defend your opinion on something. It's a pretty simple format. And trying to make it really, really general, as broad as possible, so that this is going to be applicable to anybody, not just those of you who need to complete my assignments. And in order to do that, I'm trying to use an argument that probably most of you have never really thought of in terms of an essay writing topic. And this is what I hear a lot from people who are required by me to write an essay. They say it's pointless. They're not going to have to do this in their trade, and they wish that they had more say in what they're required to do. This is, while I could argue against it, this is a perfectly workable argument to turn into an essay. And so that's what we're going to do. You got to start off at the beginning. The very first point, this is stupid, is fine, but you got to get specific. It's not going to work. If somebody's reading this, they're not even going to know what this is. And then stupid's too general too. So you got to get rid of those real general words and get specific. Now that's easy. Just replace it with what you're talking about. You don't have to spend too much time thinking about that one. Stupid's a little bit harder. An essay is a piece of paper with words on it, so it can't be stupid. Stupid and intelligent are measured by different things. And I know I'm getting kind of redunculous here, but you got to be specific. You got to be very careful with your words in your essay. So you got to get specific about what you are talking about. So you're going to replace that with what you mean more specifically. Essay writing is pointless, which is fine, except that a third grader could read this and go, essays are to get your opinion across, or they are to explain something. That's the point. And all of a sudden, they've made your thesis, pretty much impossible to defend. So once again, you got to get more specific and say exactly what you're talking about. And now we've got a working thesis. This is something you can actually defend in an essay. Essay writing is not a good use of many people's time. So good. So you're in there, but now you want to explain yourself a little bit. While that makes sense to me, I kind of want to know where you're coming from here. So you get into a little bit more detail. And this is true. A lot of folks who are in the different trades that we have at Job Corps, they're not going to be asked to write essays in their fields. It's just not a very realistic expectation to think that they will be required to. Some of you will later on. Some of you will decide later to go back to school and things like that. But, for what we're getting into, cement, heavy equipment, things like that, no, essay writing is probably not going to be something that's required a lot. So this is a good introduction. This gets your point across, and it explains what it is you're going to try to argue. So then you got to move on to the body, and in the body is where you list your reasons, your explanations, your evidence. But one of the problems with this is in essays, you should never refer to yourself. There are certain types of essays, personal, what do they call them? Personal narrative, excuse me, where you do have to refer to yourself. But in general, you want to avoid it. It's just not a good idea. So you have to take something like this and rearrange it so you're no longer talking about you, but you're talking about security guards. And while you're at it, get a little bit more specific too. Because this is true. You might actually be asked your opinion about things, but most likely that's going to be just kind of a friendly conversation. Nobody's going to ask you to write it down in an essay. And your boss certainly doesn't want you to try to argue against things with you. And if you hand him an essay, he's going to be insulted. He's going to think you're trying to take him on. So, that's not too likely. But then move out from your own field. Instead of, like, not only you're not just talking about yourself, but don't just talk about people like you. So move from security guards, I know people going into the medical fields. There's a lot of things for them to memorize. But, their bosses aren't going to want them to write it down. They're not going to be grading their essays. They just want the information done right, and they want the notes taken correctly. Um, and now that you're thinking about it, I bet some other things that are going to come to mind, it might be something like this, but it might not, this is a process while you get into it. When you start digging into your brain and coming up with reasons, especially if you don't fight it, especially if you don't sit there thinking, I hate this so much. If you instead think, how can I convince somebody? How can I show them reasons as to why this isn't a good idea? The same way you do it when you're sitting with your friends, it's just that you're using this academic language. You're trying to sound like a teacher and all that stuff. But it's the same old thing, I mean, it probably is a reasonable expectation to say reading is a more valuable skill than writing for most of the trade you're going in. You're going to be asked to read some really hard stuff. So you got this now. You got three reasons listed as to, why essay writing is not a good use of some people's time. They might instead just practice memorization or procedures or reading for that matter, might be a more useful the use of their time. And that's a mic drop right there. That's where you basically, you go boom, 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 and you really let them know the reasons. And then you move into the conclusion. This is the hardest part for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be. The conclusion is where you go, so what? You just made an argument. Even if they're not convinced, if you've done it right, they at least go, well, you got a point. Okay, I see your point. Well, what about it? That's what the conclusion is for. And, you had a conclusion in that beginning argument. Why don't you let me decide? Um, and that is a so what. But once again, you don't want to refer to yourself. And also, this just sounds whiny. You don't want to sound whiny. You want to sound authoritative. You want to sound like you know what you're talking about. So go ahead and list the different reasons that you feel should come out of this. Now that I've made my point, I should get some decision in here. But branch out. Don't just stick with one. Come up with some other ones, I've heard this one a lot from people. They did this at high school. Like they thought when they came to Job Corps they weren't going to have to do this kind of stuff anymore. And then this one might not be true for you, but it certainly is for a lot of people. It's just sometimes money takes on a bigger need than learning how to write something that I'm probably never going to have to do once I'm done with this thing. Um, so these are all good so whats. But once again, you don't want to refer to yourself. So you just got to figure out how to rewrite them. So instead of, I should get to decide, we should get to decide. And same thing over here, just switch it around. If, Job Corps is supposed to be different, how come so much is the same? And then finally, you go ahead and do this piece with the need for getting money right away. Now, this would work. This would be a decent essay in itself, but I want to throw one more thing in there because it's so useful, and it's called a hook. And this is where you really personalize it. You think about your audience, and you think about how can I interest them in it. So if you're writing this to your teachers, to me, to Miss Deb, something like that, you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, all right, so I hate this essay writing so much. How would they like it if they had to do some of the stuff that I have to do? Oh man, well, maybe they would like some of it, but pff, would they like having to get it perfect like I have to do? And so you reach with that and you kind of go, okay, well, maybe this would kind of draw them into it, right? And this is not only making another point for yourself, but it's also really drawing the reader in, right? This is a decent argument. And this is what you start with. This is the beginning of your introduction. And now you got it. You got a really decent essay. And you put it all together. You got your introduction with the hook that's interesting, that draws me in. You got a body paragraph, and that's got all those reasons with the mic drop in it. And then you conclude it with that, with those different reasons that you came up with, the different so whats. And this is good. This is a working essay. It's on the short side, but like I said, it's basic, but it has everything you need. At least 3 sentences per paragraph. All a paragraph is a group of sentences on one topic. Up here you have the beginning, here you have the reasons, here you have the so what. So you got it. You got a decent essay. The only real thing that's missing is a little bit of icing on the cake.